Captain Aidan Cruz stood at the helm of the starship Ardent, his eyes fixed on the strange, alien planet that loomed before him. It was a world unlike any he had seen before. The planet Ketra was a lush, vibrant place, its deep jungles and towering crystal cities sparkling under the light of two suns. Aidan had been sent on a diplomatic mission, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. The Ketran people, one of the most ancient and mysterious species in the galaxy, were known for their unpredictability and their vast power. And yet, despite their strength, they had remained isolated, making any contact with them an honor and a potential danger. "Captain, we've received a transmission from Princess Chera," his comm officer reported, breaking his thoughts. "She's requested your presence immediately." Aidan raised an eyebrow. The princess of the Katran Empire was not someone you simply visited. She was a ruler, a symbol of immense power and authority. To be summoned by her was a rare event, and it sent a chill through Aidan's spine. Was it a diplomatic greeting, or something more dangerous? He stood tall, pushing the doubt aside. His crew trusted him, and he trusted his instincts. It was time to meet this alien princess. After a short transport to the royal palace, Aidan stepped onto the grounds of the Katran stronghold. The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive stone spires that seemed to reach for the sky, covered in alien runes and glowing symbols. The air itself felt thick, almost alive with energy. He couldn't help but be impressed, but he kept his focus. This was no time for distractions. Inside, he was escorted by a silent, towering guard through long, shadowy halls. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the palace's strange technology. At the end of the hall, two massive doors opened, revealing the throne room. The walls were lined with glowing crystals, casting eerie light across the room. And there, seated on a raised platform, was Princess Chera. She was beautiful, but not in the way human women were beautiful. She radiated power, confidence, and an ancient grace that could only come from someone who had been born to rule. Her skin shimmered with a metallic hue, reflecting the light of the room. Her eyes were large, and her gaze piercing, as though she could see straight through Aidan, reading his every thought. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed to move on its own, as though alive. "Captain Aidan Cruz of the Ardent," she said, her voice a melodic blend of command and curiosity. "I've been waiting for you." Aidan stood tall, not letting the princess's presence intimidate him. He knew that diplomacy wasn't just about bowing to power. It was about showing respect without losing one's own. He inclined his head slightly, but his voice was steady. "Your Highness, it is an honor to be in your presence." Chera's lips curled into a small smile, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was one of knowing, of someone who had seen and done things others could not even imagine. "You must be wondering why I've called you here, human." Aidan's heart skipped a beat, but he hid it well. He had been prepared for a lot of things, but this was unexpected. "I have a request for you," Chera continued, "one that requires a personal touch." Aidan didn't move a muscle, his mind racing. He had been trained to handle anything, but this wasn't something covered in the manuals. "I'm listening." The princess stood from her throne, her movements fluid and graceful, like a predator stretching before the hunt. She walked down the steps, closing the distance between them with each measured step. "Tonight, Captain Cruz, you will sleep beside me." Aidan blinked, momentarily stunned by the bluntness of her words. For a moment, the room seemed to grow colder, and the atmosphere thickened. The silence stretched, and he realized that the princess wasn't asking, she was demanding. His mind raced. This was no ordinary request. The Ketran royal family was known for their complex rituals, and nothing they did was ever simple. Sleeping beside the princess wasn't just a personal request. It was a test of strength, of trust, or perhaps something even more intricate. He held her gaze, trying to read her, trying to understand what she was truly asking. Why? was all he managed to say. Shara's eyes glinted with something unreadable. "You'll find out soon enough, Captain. But know this, I don't make requests I don't expect to be fulfilled." She turned away, her voice softening ever so slightly. "You are not the first human I've encountered, but you are the first to interest me." Aiden's pulse quickened. He had faced countless dangers in his career, from space pirates to warlords. But this was different. The game had changed, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. But he wasn't going to back down now. Not when the future of his mission, and perhaps his life, was hanging in the balance. "I'll do it," he said, his voice unwavering. "But I need to know what this is really about." The princess turned to face him once more, a cryptic smile tugging at her lips. "You'll understand soon enough. Now, prepare yourself, Captain. The night is young." Captain Aiden Cruz followed the royal guards through the towering corridors of the Kotran Palace, his mind racing. The princess's command had been unexpected, and even now, he wasn't sure what to make of it. He had been trained for high-stakes diplomacy, but nothing in his military career had prepared him for the strange and complex world of the Kotran Empire. The walls of the palace seemed alive, covered in glowing alien symbols that pulsed with an eerie light. The air felt thick, almost heavy, as if the building itself was watching him. The guards stopped at a large set of double doors, their surfaces carved with intricate designs of dragons and mythical beasts. They opened with a low hum, and Aiden stepped into the heart of the Kotran court. The grand hall was unlike any he had ever seen, vast, open, and filled with shimmering lights and alien technology. It was beautiful, yet intimidating. Strange, floating objects drifted in the air, their glow casting strange shadows on the stone walls. Aiden could feel the weight of the room's history, as if centuries of power and intrigue had taken place within these walls. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, stood Princess Shara. She was no longer seated on her throne, but now she moved among her people, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The royal court had gathered, a mix of dignitaries, warriors, and nobles, all watching Aiden with curiosity. Some of them eyed him with distrust, while others studied him with a strange intensity. It was clear that this was a place where power ruled, and even the smallest mistake could lead to disaster. Shara's voice echoed through the room as she greeted the court. Her eyes, however, were fixed on Aiden, studying him, weighing him as though she could read his every thought. The Kotran were known for their sharp minds and their ability to manipulate the very fabric of reality with their advanced technology and psychic abilities. But in that moment, Aiden felt a deeper challenge, one of understanding her, of proving himself worthy not just of her trust, but of her respect. "Captain Cruz," Shara called, her voice clear and full of authority. "You've come to us as an emissary of humanity. But do you truly understand what it means to be in the presence of a Kotran princess?" Aiden met her gaze, trying not to be intimidated. He had seen countless powerful leaders in his life, but something about Shara was different. She radiated a quiet strength, one that didn't need to shout to be heard. "I understand the importance of respect," he said carefully. "And I've learned that power isn't always about strength. It's about the ability to make difficult choices." Shara's lips curved slightly, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You speak wisely, Captain. But do you understand the cost of those choices?" Before Aiden could respond, the princess turned, her attention now shifting to the crowd. She raised her hand, and the court fell silent. "I've invited you here for more than just words," Shara said, her voice carrying across the room. "I've invited you because I believe humanity has something that my people lack. Something raw. Something powerful." Aiden's curiosity piqued. "And what's that?" he asked, his tone cautious. The princess stepped down from the platform, walking slowly toward him. The room seemed to hold its breath as she moved, her every step graceful and deliberate. When she reached him, she stood close enough that Aiden could feel the heat of her presence. There was something unnerving about the way she looked at him, like she was seeing far beyond what he had shown her. "You have something we lost long ago," she said softly. "A sense of purpose, a hunger to conquer not just the galaxy, but the unknown." She paused, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You fight not just for survival, but for meaning." Aiden blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't come here to lecture you on human nature, Princess. I came here to help, if you'll allow it." Shara's expression softened for a moment, and in that instant, Aiden caught a glimpse of something deeper. It was fleeting, like a shadow passing through her regal mask. Perhaps it was loneliness, or perhaps a desire to break free from the shackles of her royal duties. But whatever it was, Aiden knew it wasn't something she would show to anyone lightly. "Help." Shara's voice lowered. "Perhaps, but only if you can prove yourself worthy." Before Aiden could ask what she meant, a loud crash echoed through the hall. The sound came from outside the palace. An explosion, followed by the faint roar of gunfire. The court tensed, and Shara's eyes snapped to the doors, her expression hardening. "Something is happening," she muttered. "The Thrixians have found us." The room erupted into chaos as guards scrambled to prepare for an attack. Aiden instinctively reached for his sidearm, his military training kicking in. The Ketran court wasn't just a gathering of diplomats. It was a haunt of political intrigue, and now it seemed that danger was about to tear it all apart. Shara turned back to him, her eyes intense. "You wanted to understand my people, Captain Cruz. Then you will. Tonight." Aiden nodded, his heart pounding. He had come here to serve as a diplomat, but now he was thrust into a conflict far greater than he had imagined. The princess's world was a deadly game of power, and he was just beginning to understand how high the stakes truly were. The explosion outside the palace doors sent a wave of shock through the royal court. The Ketran nobles jumped to their feet, reaching for their weapons, while the royal guards rushed to secure the exits. Captain Aiden Cruz stayed calm, his military training kicking in as he quickly assessed the situation. Shara's sharp eyes never left him, watching his every move. "What's happening?" Aiden asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Shara's face hardened, and for a moment, her usual calm demeanor cracked. "The Thrixians have found us," she said, her voice cold. "We are at war." Aiden had heard of the Thrixians, ruthless, powerful, and without mercy. They were an empire that had been in conflict with the Ketran people for decades, and now, it seemed, the fighting had reached the very heart of Ketra. But the real question was why the Thrixians had attacked so suddenly, and what this meant for his mission. The princess stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. "Prepare the defenses," she commanded, her voice clear and full of authority. "I will handle the captain." Aiden furrowed his brow. "Handle me? What does that mean?" Without answering, Shara motioned for Aiden to follow her as she turned toward a narrow hallway. Her guards immediately formed a protective line behind them, but it was clear the princess was the one in charge here. She moved quickly, her pace swift and determined. Aiden had no choice but to keep up. They reached a large chamber, far from the main palace halls. Inside, the walls were lined with ancient weapons, some of which looked older than the Ketran Empire itself. The room was quiet, save for the distant sounds of the ongoing conflict outside the palace. "Sit," Shara ordered, pointing to a stone bench at the center of the room. "You are here because I need to know if you are worthy of my trust." Aiden was confused, but didn't argue. He took a seat, watching Shara closely. He had no idea what she meant by this, but he knew better than to question her. His job was to adapt, to understand, and to survive. "You said you wanted to help my people," Shara continued, pacing in front of him. "You said you understood power, but now you will prove it. I will test you, Captain Cruz. You will face the trial of strength." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. The trial of strength was a Ketran tradition, one that was said to be nearly impossible for outsiders to survive. It was a test of both physical and mental toughness, meant to prove that one was worthy of the Katran people's respect. "I didn't come here for a test," Aiden replied, standing up. "I came to negotiate peace." Shara turned to face him, her eyes sharp. "Peace is not always found through words, human. Sometimes it must be earned through action." Before Aiden could respond, the floor beneath him shifted. He barely had time to react as the room transformed, the stone bench and weapons melting away to reveal a vast, shifting arena. The walls were now a dark, alien blue, and the ground was covered in strange symbols. It was clear now that this wasn't just a simple test. It was a trial designed to challenge everything Aiden knew about survival. A loud roar echoed through the chamber, followed by a massive creature bursting through one of the walls. It was a beast, unlike anything Aiden had ever seen, towering, with scales like iron and glowing eyes that burned with rage. It was a Katran guardian, an ancient protector of the royal bloodline. "You will face it," Shara said, her voice unwavering. "Defeat this guardian, and you will have proven yourself worthy." Aiden's mind raced. He wasn't here to fight monsters. He was a diplomat, not a soldier. But he knew that in this moment, his survival depended on his ability to think quickly. The guardian charged, its massive claws scraping against the stone floor as it lunged toward Aiden. Without thinking, he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its deadly swipe. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no time to hesitate. He needed to act. The guardian roared again, and Aiden's military instincts kicked in. He spotted a long, jagged piece of metal protruding from the floor, a broken weapon left from some previous battle. He grabbed it, using it as a makeshift spear. The guardian was fast, but Aiden had the advantage of human resourcefulness. He dodged another swipe, aiming his spear at the creature's vulnerable underbelly. The beast roared in pain as the metal pierced its thick hide. But it wasn't enough to stop it. The guardian turned, enraged, and prepared for another attack. Shara watched in silence, her eyes never leaving the fight. Aiden could feel the weight of her gaze on him, but he didn't let it distract him. This was his moment to prove himself. He couldn't afford to fail. In a swift, calculated move, Aiden dropped to one knee, using the broken spear to block the guardian's next attack. He twisted the weapon, causing the creature to stumble, and then drove the spear deep into its side. The guardian let out a final, guttural roar before collapsing to the ground, defeated. Aiden stood over the beast, breathing heavily, his body covered in sweat. The room slowly began to return to its original form, the walls and floor shifting back into place. Shara stepped forward, her face unreadable. "You have passed the trial of strength, Captain Cruz, but this is only the beginning." Aiden didn't respond immediately, still catching his breath. He had survived, barely, but he knew the real challenge had just begun. Shara's gaze was intense, as though she was waiting for something. He wasn't sure what, but he was about to find out. Aiden stood over the fallen guardian, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. The fight had been brutal, but it was far from over. The Katran princess, Shara, walked toward him, her eyes cold and unreadable. Her presence, despite the dangerous trial, was more powerful than ever. "You've proven your strength," she said, her voice calm, but there was something else in her tone. "But strength is only one part of the challenge here." Aiden wiped the sweat from his forehead, his muscles sore and aching. He had never imagined a peaceful diplomatic mission would turn into a fight for survival. "I didn't come here to fight your monsters," he said, his voice firm despite his exhaustion. "I came here to understand your people." Shara didn't answer immediately. She simply stared at him, her piercing gaze measuring him in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. The tension between them was thick, the silence stretching on. But then, at last, she spoke. "Do you still believe you can understand us, human?" she asked. Her voice held a quiet challenge. "What you've seen here, what you've faced, is only the surface of who we are. The true nature of the Katran people is hidden far deeper." Aiden felt his heart beat faster, But he didn't back down. "I've seen enough to know you're not the simple, cold rulers I first thought you were," he said. "There's something more to you. Something human, maybe. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to learn." Shara's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first time she had shown any emotion beyond her usual stoic expression. "You think you understand, Captain Cruz," she said softly. "But understanding is not the same as belonging." She motioned for him to follow her, and without another word, she turned and began walking toward the far side of the chamber. The room shifted once again, its shape changing as they moved, the walls shimmering and rearranging. It was as if the palace itself responded to the princess's presence. "Where are we going?" Aiden asked, curiosity beginning to outweigh his exhaustion. "To the heart of the Ketran Empire," Shara replied, her voice distant. "To a place even few of my people have ever seen." The further they walked, the more strange the palace became. The walls now pulsed with a soft, glowing light, and the air felt charged with an unfamiliar energy. Aiden couldn't help but feel that they were leaving behind the world he knew and entering something far older, far more mysterious. Finally, they arrived at a large, circular chamber. At its center was a stone pedestal, and on it rested an object wrapped in a cloth. Shara stopped in front of it and motioned for Aiden to approach. "This," she said, her voice lowering, "is the heart of our people. It is the source of our strength, our power, and our downfall." Aiden stepped forward, intrigued. "What is it?" Shara removed the cloth, revealing a small, glowing crystal. It pulsed with a soft, inner light, and as Aiden gazed at it, he felt a strange connection to it, as if the crystal itself was calling to him. The air in the room grew heavier, as if the object held a secret too powerful to be easily understood. "This crystal," Shara continued, "was given to our ancestors by the gods of the old worlds. It holds the essence of Katrat itself, the power that has shaped our empire for millennia." Aiden's brow furrowed. "But if it's so powerful, why are you showing it to me?" Shara's expression darkened. "Because it's dying," she said simply. "The crystal is the heart of our people, but it has been weakening for centuries. As it fades, so does our power. Without it, our empire will crumble, and we will be nothing but dust in the stars." Aiden took a step closer, his gaze never leaving the crystal. It seemed so fragile, so delicate, yet it held the fate of an entire civilization within it. "What do you want from me?" Shara looked at him with a depth that sent a chill down his spine. "I need your help, Captain Cruz. The Katran people cannot survive without this crystal, and I cannot let it die. You've shown that you have the strength to face our trials, but now you must prove that you have the courage to take on something far greater." Aiden's mind raced. This was no longer just about diplomacy or survival. This was about the future of the Katran people, and possibly the entire galaxy. If the crystal was truly dying, it would mean the end of an entire species. The implications were immense. "What do you want me to do?" Aiden asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his mind. Shara's eyes bore into him, her gaze intense and filled with an emotion he hadn't expected. "I need you to find the cure," she said, the words heavy with meaning. "The cure that will restore the crystal's power, and the future of my people." Aiden's heart pounded. This was it. This was the mission. Not only was the fate of the Katran people at stake, but now, it seemed, so was the future of the galaxy itself. He nodded slowly, accepting the weight of the responsibility. "I'll do it," he said, determination in his voice. "But I need to know one thing. Why me? Why a human?" Shara's gaze softened just a fraction. "Because, Captain Cruz, you are the only one who has shown the strength to endure. And because you may be the key to saving us all." The ship hummed steadily as it moved deeper into the darkness of the Forbidden Nebula. Outside, the swirling mass of gases and energy clouds loomed larger, casting an eerie glow on the ship's exterior. Aiden felt his heart racing. There was something both beautiful and terrifying about the nebula, an endless expanse of mystery and danger. No one knew what truly lay inside, but the legend spoke of storms that could tear ships apart, of strange creatures that stalked the dark void, and of ancient secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. How long until we reach the core of the nebula? Aiden asked, trying to steady his nerves. He didn't know much about space travel, but he had learned to trust the skill of Katran pilots. And Lieutenant Sarah, despite her quiet demeanor, had already proven herself to be a master. "We'll reach the heart in about 2 hours," Sarah replied, her voice calm, yet sharp with focus. She had been quiet for most of the journey, but now, Aiden could sense her concentration. The nebula was no place for careless mistakes. Aiden glanced out the window again. The swirling mass of the nebula seemed alive, moving, shifting in ways that defied logic. The starboard side of the ship flickered as the radiation fields from the nebula interfered with their sensors. It made him uneasy, but he knew there was no turning back now. The fate of the Ketran people rested on what they would find at the heart of this place. "What exactly are we looking for?" Aiden asked, turning to Sarah. He had seen the crystal that powered the Katran Empire, but he still didn't fully understand what the cure was. Could it really save them? Or were they on a wild chase that would lead to nothing but destruction? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then looked at him. "The cure is a substance, something that can restore the crystal's energy. But it's not just a physical thing. It's linked to the ancient Katran knowledge, a power we lost when the elders disappeared." Aiden nodded. He knew the Katran people had once been a mighty empire, their influence reaching across many systems. But the crystal's power had begun to fade, and without it, they would fall. That much was clear. The legends say that the cure can be found in the heart of the nebula, in the ruins of a lost city. Sarah continued, her fingers dancing across the controls. "But no one who's gone looking for it has ever returned. It's a place of danger, and whatever power is hidden there is protected by forces no one understands." Aiden's mind raced. A lost city, hidden deep within the nebula, guarded by unknown forces. The mission was becoming even more dangerous by the minute, but he couldn't back out now. Not when so much was at stake. "We'll find it," Aiden said, more to himself than to Sarah. "We have to." Sarah didn't respond, but Aiden could feel her resolve. The silence between them was heavy, the ship cutting through the blackness of space as they neared the heart of the nebula. Outside, the swirling clouds of gas and energy intensified, glowing with deep reds, purples, and blues. It was beautiful, but dangerous. They were no longer in the safety of known space. They were entering the unknown. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, and the lights flickered. Aiden jumped in his seat, his heart skipping a beat. "What's happening?" "Radiation surge," Sarah said, her voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. "We're passing through a zone of intense cosmic energy. The shields can't hold forever." Aiden's mind raced. They were vulnerable now, exposed to the full force of the nebula's dangers. He could see the energy readings flashing on the monitor, each spike growing higher and more erratic. If the shields failed, they would be torn apart. "Do we have enough power to keep the shields up?" Aiden asked, gripping the armrests tightly. Sarah worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. "I'm adjusting the power distribution. The shields will hold for now, but we'll need to move faster." Outside, the swirling clouds grew denser, and strange shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Aiden squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Something was out there, moving in the shadows, something large and fast. Was it a ship? A creature? "I'm not sure we're alone," Aiden muttered, watching as the shapes grew closer. "Stay calm," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We've got this." Aiden took a deep breath, trying to push his fear aside. He wasn't just here to help the Katran people. He was here to survive, and to save them from extinction. That thought drove him forward, kept him focused. The strange shapes outside grew larger, and suddenly, A massive shadow loomed over the ship. Aiden gasped as something enormous, something with gleaming, razor-sharp wings, moved past them at high speed. It was a creature, a predator of the nebula. And it was fast, powerful, and hungry. Sarah didn't flinch. "Brace yourself," she warned, as the ship lurched forward. The creature shot past them, its shadow sweeping across the ship's hull, and the force of its movement caused a shockwave that rocked the vessel. Aiden gripped the seat, feeling the ship shudder from the impact. The creature was gone as quickly as it had appeared, vanishing into the depths of the nebula. But Aiden knew it wouldn't be the last danger they'd face. "We're not alone in here," Aiden said, his voice tight. Sarah's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. She was too focused on keeping the ship intact. There was no room for distractions now. "Just keep your eyes on the coordinates," Aiden said, his voice firm. "We're getting closer to the heart. We can't turn back now." As they pressed deeper into the nebula, Aiden knew that whatever awaited them at the center, whether it was the cure or something far worse, would change everything. The ship shook violently as they moved deeper into the heart of the forbidden nebula. Aiden's hands gripped the armrests tightly, his knuckles white with tension. The creature they had encountered earlier still haunted his mind. It was only the beginning of the dangers that awaited them in this dark, unexplored part of space. Sarah's face was set in a hard, focused expression as she guided the ship through the swirling clouds of gas and energy. The alarms continued to blare in warning, but she never faltered. She was a skilled pilot, and Aiden knew that if anyone could get them through this alive, it was her. "We're almost there," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The readings are off the charts, but the coordinates are clear. We're at the center of the nebula." Aiden looked out the window. A swirling mass of glowing energy and dark matter surrounded them. But in the midst of it, there was a glimmer, a strange, steady light, shining like a beacon. It was the source of the power they were searching for, the place where the cure might be found. "There it is," Aiden said, pointing at the light. "That's it, right? The heart of the nebula." Sarah nodded. "That's where the ruins are, and where the cure is said to lie." The closer they got, the more unsettling the surroundings became. The light grew brighter, and the ship's instruments began to flicker wildly. Something was interfering with their systems, making it harder to navigate. The air felt thick with energy, and Aiden could sense that they were nearing something far older than anything they had ever encountered. The nebula was not just a barrier, it was alive, watching them. As they approached the source of the light, the ship suddenly jolted. A loud bang echoed through the hull, and the lights flickered before going out entirely. They were plunged into darkness, the only sound the hum of the ship's failing systems. "We've lost power," Sarah shouted, slamming her hand against the control panel in frustration. "The energy surge from the core is too strong. The ship can't handle it." Aiden cursed under his breath. They were so close, but now they were stranded. The ship's shields were still holding, but for how long? And what lay ahead in the ruins? They couldn't waste time. They had to move fast. "Can we make it to the surface?" Aiden asked, glancing at the rapidly blinking lights on the console. "We can't just sit here." "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied, gritting her teeth. "If we don't land soon, the radiation will tear the ship apart." Without waiting for another word, Aiden grabbed his gear and rushed toward the rear hatch. Sarah followed closely behind, and the two of them quickly made their way to the exit. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the cold, dense air of the nebula greeted them. The surface they had landed on was rocky, uneven, and covered in strange, glowing plants that pulsed with an eerie light. Aiden's boots crunched against the ground as he stepped out, his heart pounding in his chest. "We're here," he said, looking around. The ruins of an ancient city lay before them, half buried in dust and rubble. Tall, jagged structures stretched up into the sky, their surfaces covered with strange symbols and markings. It was a place of ancient power, an abandoned city that had not seen visitors in centuries. Sarah scanned the area with a wary eye. "Stay close," she warned. "The legends say the city is protected by more than just the nebula's energy. There are traps here. We can't be too careful." Aiden nodded, his hand resting on the blaster at his side. "Let's find the cure and get out of here." They made their way toward the heart of the ruins, moving cautiously through the broken streets. The further they went, the more the city seemed to come alive. Strange, whispering sounds echoed through the empty halls, and flickering lights seemed to move just out of the corner of their eyes. At the center of the city, they found a large open courtyard. In the center stood an ancient temple, its towering structure partially crumbled but still standing strong. The walls were covered with intricate carvings that seemed to tell the story of the Kitran people, of their rise to power, their connection to the crystal, and the ancient secrets that had been lost to time. Aiden stepped forward, his breath caught in his throat. This was it, the heart of the Kitran Empire, the place where the cure had been hidden for so long. He could feel the weight of history in the air. "There has to be something here," Aiden said, looking around. "The cure, it has to be in this temple." Sarah walked toward the entrance, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She paused when she saw something etched into the stone door. It was a symbol, one that matched the shape of the crystal they had seen earlier. The connection was unmistakable. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "We found it." Together, they pushed open the heavy doors, revealing a chamber filled with glowing energy. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it lay a small vial filled with a glowing substance. The cure. Aiden stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached for the vial, but as his hand touched it, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The ancient city groaned, as if awakening from a long slumber. "Take it and go," Sarah shouted, urgency in her voice. "We need to leave now." But Aiden hesitated. This wasn't just about saving the Kitran people anymore. It was about saving everything. If this power could restore the crystal, it could restore balance to the entire galaxy. With one final glance at Sarah, he grabbed the vial. The ground shook violently as the temple began to collapse around them. "We're out of time," Aiden shouted. They ran, the entire city falling apart behind them. The cure was in his hands, and the future of the Kitran people was in their grasp. Now they just had to make it out alive. The chamber felt colder now, the weight of Shara's words hanging heavy in the air. Aiden's mind raced. The Kitran Empire, a civilization that had ruled the stars for centuries, was dying, and somehow he had been pulled into the heart of their crisis. The crystal, their lifeblood, was failing, and Shara had placed her hopes on him, on a human. "What is this cure you're talking about?" Aiden asked, trying to shake the lingering shock of her revelation. "Where can I find it?" Shara's eyes glowed with an inner fire, the faintest trace of hope flickering in her gaze. "The cure is an ancient secret, one known only to the first elders of Kitra. It is said to lie hidden, deep within the Forbidden Nebula, a place that no one has returned from." Aiden's stomach twisted. The Forbidden Nebula. A place of legend, a deadly, uncharted region of space, known for its strange phenomena and deadly creatures. Many had gone in search of its secrets, but none had returned. "You want me to go there?" Aiden asked, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "To the Forbidden Nebula." Shara nodded solemnly. "Yes, you must find the cure, or my people will perish. The crystal cannot survive without it. And if it dies, so will Katra. And with it, the balance of power in the galaxy." Aiden could feel the weight of her words. The Katran Empire was not just another political entity. It was a key player in the galactic balance. If they fell, it would trigger chaos across the stars. And yet, he had no choice but to accept. The fate of an entire species, and perhaps the galaxy, now rested on his shoulders. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I'll do it," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "But I'll need a ship and a crew." Shara's expression softened slightly. You will have both. I will send you with one of my most trusted commanders, Lieutenant Sarah, she said. She knows the nebula well, and though she has never ventured inside, she is the best pilot in the Empire. Aiden nodded, relieved that he would not be alone. Even with a crew member, the nebula was still a terrifying place. No one knew what lay inside. Where do I start? Aiden asked, the first steps of the journey already forming in his mind. Shara's lips curved into a faint smile. You will depart at once. The longer we wait, the weaker the crystal becomes. There is no time to waste. With that, she led Aiden out of the chamber and back through the winding halls of the palace. The sound of battle had died down, but the atmosphere remained tense. The Ketran were warriors, yes, but they also had a deep understanding of their own frailty. They knew that without the crystal, they would fall. They arrived at a docking bay where a sleek, silver ship stood ready. Its hull gleamed in the dim light, the shape sharp and angular, built for speed and stealth. Aiden's eyes scanned it, impressed by its design. This was a ship that could survive the dangers of the nebula. Shara stopped in front of the ship and turned to face him. You must leave immediately, she said. There is little time to waste. Do not fail us, Captain Cruz. The future of my people depends on you. Aiden nodded, his heart racing. He couldn't afford to fail. The pressure of his mission was overwhelming, but he had no choice but to press forward. With a final glance at Shara, he stepped into the ship, and the hatch closed behind him with a soft hiss. Inside, the ship was all business. Minimalist, with sharp controls and advanced technology that Aiden could barely comprehend. He was no expert in alien technology, but he knew enough to pilot the ship. As he strapped himself into the captain's seat, the door to the bridge opened, and in walked Lieutenant Sarah. She was tall and athletic, with sharp features and a look of quiet determination. Her uniform was a deep shade of blue, marked with the insignia of the Ketran military. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded toward Aiden as she took the co-pilot's seat. Aiden gave her a brief smile, though he wasn't sure what to expect. He had been in plenty of missions before, but this one was unlike any other. They were about to enter a place where even the bravest Ketran dared not venture. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty creeping up on him. Let's go. Sarah nodded without a word and began activating the ship's systems. The engines hummed to life, and the ship slowly lifted off the ground, ascending through the atmosphere of Ketra. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, Aiden gazed out the window, the vastness of space stretching before them. It was beautiful, but it also felt emptier than ever. The nebula loomed ahead, a dark, swirling mass of clouds and energy that promised only danger and uncertainty. As they approached the edge of the forbidden nebula, Aiden's heart raced. This was it, the beginning of a journey that could mean the end for the Ketran people or the salvation of a galaxy on the brink of war. Hold on tight, Sarah said, her voice steady as she set the ship on a course toward the unknown. This is where the real challenge begins.